Okay, what is your immediate reaction to this visual, this sketch of the opera house with the sold sign? And think, why do you react this way? And what emotions are behind your reaction? When I look at it, I'm sort of like, whoa, shock, horror. What? Why are we selling it? And the emotions behind it for me, the shock, the horror is, goodness me, that's an Australian icon. You know, how can we be selling that? Surely that's not true. Like, it's disbelief in a sense. I mean, others can have more cynical reactions. Like someone I know said, how could anybody afford that with the Sydney prices? So it depends on the context of where you're putting the things. Let's have a look. So let's imagine that this sketch is in whatever persuasive text you've written. Now let's look at what you think the caption for the visual should be. Now this visual is, remember, it's a sketch of the opera house and it's got a big sold sign in front of it. We've already been thinking about appeals to the readers. So what could the caption be? Maybe something like, not our opera house, with that "our" being in here and an exclamation mark. Like, that's a shock horror sort of reaction. We could have that one. If you wanted to extend it, you might say, what's next? And then you might even say the bridge. Like, you could take this further if you wanted to. Captions are part of visuals and they're very, very important. They can reinforce a feeling or an emotion and, in that sense, an appeal. This is the lesson on visuals, and we are in section 2, knowledge and skills for analysing persuasive texts. What's in this lesson? The lesson breakdown, visuals and their role in analysis, different forms of visuals, and there are many, 10 visual terms or features explained, and examples of still image visuals. The most relevant study design points include: identify, analyse and apply the role of visuals to support and enhance argument, the features of print and digital, and using always relevant meta-language. Let's look firstly at visuals and their role in analysis. So a visual is defined as a picture, photograph, film or other still or moving image used for a particular effect. They may be integrated into a print or digital text, or they could be a separate text entirely. I strongly, an assessor and experienced VCE teacher, strongly advise you, always analyse the visuals in your written response. What does VCAR say? VCAR says you are expected to identify and analyse the role of visuals to support and enhance argument in your written analysis. The very high performance descriptor for SAC 1 examines subtle connections between visuals and the implications of these features in relation to the attended audience. It's important to note that there'll be more information on audiovisual text, this needs a little hyphen there, in a later lesson in this same section. So how do we analyse visuals? Firstly, you need to state the form and briefly describe the composition of the visual using the correct meta-language. And remember, meta-language, the vocab or terms used to describe and define language. So that would be, we'd be talking about speech bubbles, captions, especially like from the hook slide about the opera house. Then we need to identify how the visual appeals to the audience's emotion. For example, their sense of patriotism with the opera house, humour, trust, fairness, etc. And then you need to say how the visuals complement, support, enhance, illustrate, reinforce or emphasise, all good verbs, mix it up a bit. An aspect of argument, whichever, maybe a main point, maybe the contention, and describe the likely effect on the intended audience. Okay, you cannot just identify the type and composition of the visual. Different forms of still image visuals. Okay, remember, if you want to know more about the moving image, that's in the audiovisual lesson. So examples of still image visuals. We have cartoon. Now that can be a single frame or a series of frames. We have graph, table. We have an infographic, which is a visual representation of information as a chart or a diagram. It can be a combination of photos, symbols, words, link lines, all sorts of things. You have a meme, image or piece of text, humorous in nature, that is copied and spread by internet users. Watermarks, those faded ones that are underneath the text. Flowcharts, signs, advertisement, advertorial, community poster, photograph, logo, letterhead, image, sketch, and there's other ones as well. It's important if you are uncertain of the form of a visual, like it's not an obvious photograph, it's not an obvious cartoon, seems to be a bit of a mishmash, you can simply refer to it as an image. So here is one sample of a visual. It's a cartoon. And the cartoon is from the 2023 VCA sample exam, which will be addressed in far more detail in section 5 of this course. When we look at this and we're thinking about, okay, what is it? So we know that the form, cartoon, the composition, that is what's inside it, is a lady on a park bench feeding birds. And it also has a speech bubble. Here's our speech bubble here with the text. And you can quote the text if you want. Hey, go easy on the carbs. It might be an idea to say from the birds. So it's not the lady saying that, it's the bird. When we analyse, we're looking at the form, the composition, and the speech bubble is part of the composition. So the contention here, just with this cartoon, is clearly there's a problem feeding the birds. That feeding birds is a problem. The tone here, as with most cartoons, is humorous. What makes this humour sometimes is difficult to talk about. But this is funny here because we've got one of the birds here, not eating, but actually telling the lady feeding them, hey, how about go easy on the carbs, meaning this is not necessarily a good thing. And she's actually looking a bit puzzled, so we could have her looking a bit puzzled if you wanted. There's no end of stuff that you can write. You could write a whole essay on this, but you're not really encouraged to. Brief composition with the salient points is what you need. So let's look now at this sample visual, which is a photograph of a sign. This photograph also is from the 2023 VCA sample exam. So there'll be more detail on this in section 5 of this course. Let's have a look though. Its form, it is a photograph of a sign with, I would say, very clear text, whatever the text is. Okay, when we look at here, the sign clearly denotes the contention as well. It's really obvious and it's very, very straightforward. Okay, the tone, what would we say about the tone? It's a very formal sign. Do not feed the birds. It doesn't say why or whatever. I would think it's, you could say authoritative. I have to think twice about that spelling. It's a very authoritative, almost imperative tone, like you will, do not feed the feed the birds. Very strong, very strong. Let's look at this sample visual, which was an infographic taken from the 2014 VCA exam. This was a really interesting visual because not many students and assessors knew that it was actually called an infographic. Students who didn't know that term just simply referred to it as an image, and that was fine. So we had our form here, infographic, plus we have a description of it. So it's, comprised of photographs, little link lines emanating from inventions or inventions due to space exploration, and you would name or quote some of them. Okay, here it's harder to identify the tone here because we'd need more of the context. We'd need to know what the contention was of the argument or some of the argument points. So it's a little bit vague here with that one. So just need to know a bit more. Here's another sample visual. This one is a graph, but you can see it's actually got other things as well, bit of some added extras. This very clearly here is the graph, and it's from the 2013 sample exam. So you would say probably that the whole thing, the image was comprised of maybe 3 components: a graph, some text, and a shopping trolley. You would probably focus here, cost of this, related. Like the previous slide, we would need to know more of the context, like what is the contention of this persuasive text? How does this image support, reinforce, or challenge any of those points? So this one is just a little bit tricky too. But why I've included this one is because it's not just one graph, even though it's called a graph here, we've got these added bits. So in a sense with this one, it's probably too simplistic to call it a graph because it's actually 3 components. So maybe we could call it here an image with 3 components, saying what they are and then referring them back to contention or argument points. But we need to know more context here with this one. Now, here is a meme. I particularly like this meme. So we know that already the tone is humorous here. Humorous is often a tricky word to spell too. And so we know here that it's a meme with a photograph of sleeping koala, sleeping or sunbaking, maybe doing a bit of both. Sleeping koala in tree, but with speech bubbles. And you could quote one or both of those if you wanted to. And it's actually the content of the words in the speech bubbles, the contents, are what provides the humour here. So this is, an intended word, synonymous perhaps with koala action or inaction. So this is a separate text, not linked, this one, not linked to anything in particular, but you could see how it would fit into some sort of perhaps environmental or protectionist animal text if needed. Here I've listed 10 common features of visual texts with some explanation. There are loads more features, but I think these are the ones probably that you will most likely use. So we've already had a look at composition, the number of items, subjects, where they are in relation to one another. Framing, literally how the visual is framed. Is it cropped to emphasise the subject? So we could crop that one from the meme even further so it was just the koala. You can do all sorts of things like that, including wide shot to give it more context, or crop where it doesn't. Focal point is where the audience's attention is drawn to first. Sometimes this is really, really obvious. Colour and shading. You might not come across any colour in your written sack, and you usually don't in the end of the year exam. However, that there might be shading, which may signify all sorts of things, If there are colours in your written sack, then you need to think, well, what do the colours symbolise? And I've just put an example there. Red symbolises passion, white is for the pureness, black is evil. Some of that stuff is really obvious. Number 5, symbols and icons. Signature signs that identify a subject. Okay, so we've got skull and crossbones, represents danger. An icon is a symbol or image of a sacred, much-loved subject, like the Sydney Opera House, which we had on our hook slide, and a koala, both national icons. Body text, words within the frame of the text, signs or speech bubbles. Caption, they're the words outside, usually underneath the frame of the text. A logo, an image that reflects a company or a product. Italics, bolding, and bullet points. These are more used to emphasise points within a text. So reports, advertorials, sometimes things like that will have lots of bullet points, lots of bolding, lots of subheadings, and italics. A watermark, a faint or design in the background, like part of the paper if it's a print text itself, visible beneath the text. For example, a money sign can be a watermark. Often there are lots of watermarks in invitations that denote the occasions for things. tricky. I haven't really seen one in an exam paper for a very long time. Now here's a multiple choice activity for you to do. You need to identify which of the visual terms best matches the definition. Yes, so my response to this multiple choice, which of the visual terms matches the following definition? An image that reflects a company or product is B, logo. Here's the second multiple choice activity for you to select the best visual term that matches the definition. Here's my response. Which of the visual terms matches the following definition? Words outside, usually underneath the frame of the text. C, caption. And here's the third multiple choice activity. Which term best matches the definition? Here's my response. Which of the visual terms matches the following definition used to emphasize points within a text? And my choice is C, italics, bolding, or bullet points. So, in a nutshell, we've got lots of key terms that you probably need to familiarise yourself with. Visual, meta-language, composition, framing, focal point, colours and shading, symbols and icons, body text, caption, logo, italics, bolding, bullet points, and watermark. Okay, I'm now going to attempt to draw two forms, and we'll just to see by way of explanation. So let's have an image. Okay, an image of a pussycat, because I cannot draw much else. And this pussycat has a speech bubble, so that's good, we know that. If we were going to have a caption, we'd have it here. Okay, so there's a couple of the terms there. We could actually put in here as well symbol or icon. If I could draw a koala, I would put it in there, but I can't. So we might just have the Opera House again. Marvellous, there we go. And that will be an icon, an Australian icon, and that would all be part of the composition. Okay, if I'm going to draw a watermark, just to explain what it means, I might have some sort of report. Let's say this is report on Year 12 social, something of interest to us all. And it might have lots and lots and lots and lots of comments, bullet points, headings, things like that. But right through it, it might have the word draft just faintly underneath the background of all of it. Now this word draft being faintly on the background underneath is a watermark. Okay, that's it for this lesson, and coming up next, audio and audiovisual texts.